There was some accusations that it was fraudulent, the elections in Russia. Have you heard such things?
Well, I think the people who make these accusations, let's name them, it would probably be uh, Western Europe and America have an agenda in making such accusations because they do not want Putin to stay in power because he represents a resurgence of Russian power and domination um, of itself and the surrounding countries. So the U.S., who sees Russia and Putin as a threat, is of course going to say that the elections are rigged, etc. But it's ironic because the same people that make such accusations are themselves, receiving the same accusations that their elections were rigged. I mean, there's many accusations against Obama that said that he doesn't even have U.S. citizenship, and there was accusations against Bush saying that he rigged both elections. So I think people in glass houses shouldn't throw stones.
Yeah, I mean, Obama might not have a birth certificate. He might have U.S. passport, but not a birth certificate, something like that. But let's see. Um, so, I guess it's sort of like that's how they do the colored revolutions. They say the state is fraudulent, or they kind of is there some connection by saying fraudulent elections and creating a color revolution?
Well, I think the colored revolutions at the moment are painted as pro-democracy revolutions. And this word democracy is thrown around a lot, and we're supposed to, uh, look up to it as the perfect system. Well, you know, Plato back 2,000 years ago invented something called a republic, which is supposed to, supersede and take over from this democracy because republics they protect the rights of the individual, whereas democracy is just majority rule. So the majority of people can vote to destroy a minority of people under a democracy. So there's systems that exist now that are better than democracy. And in any case, this ideal democracy that we're sold is not what we get. What we really get is a puppet government that has the illusion of democracy, the illusion of power to the people, when it's really just, uh, elect capitalist A or collect pro-US capitalist B, and you get, you know, something that doesn't look after what the people want. It just looks after what corporations want. So that's what they're selling. And there's a man called George Soros, and he funds a lot of these pro-democracy and activist movements in various countries to try to overthrow the governments there and install their own puppets under, the pretense and um, the talking point of democracy. It's basically the new Christianity. People, the governments of old used to say we have to take over this country in order to, show these savages like the Christian religion. Now it's the same thing. We have to show these backwater countries what a democracy is, etc.
Is terrible. I mean, they should know that it doesn't matter who you vote for. I mean, we've had every kind of government here, and they just keep going to war, and it's not really. I think the original democracy was about voting for ideas and not people, which is really very
Yeah,
different. Um,
definitely very different.
yeah. So, what's going on in Syria at this time, please?
Well, at this time, the um, military action in the district of Bab Amr, which was in response to the insurgency there, has been completed. So the Syrian army had gone into Bab Amr and um, you know stopped these foreign-funded insurgents from you know taking this place over, and that's been completed. Um, in terms of colored revolutions, the it's the same thing really happening there. You've got this George Soros. He's donating money to and setting up these organizations that are supposed to be pro-democracy, and his actions are easily spotted because he likes to, with his movements, he likes to give them a flag or a color. So that's where the term color revolutions come from. If you remember, Ukraine had its orange revolution a few years ago. That was one of his signatures. Libya had a change of flag. Iraq had a change of flag.
So are you saying
Um,
he is involved in Syria?
yeah, certainly. So he um, also is involved in Amnesty International, and the board, one of the board members there actually worked under Clinton. Her name is Susan Nosel. So it just shows show you like under a philanthropy and humanitarian guise, they fund these supposedly humanitarian organizations, and then Amnesty International ends up just uh, basically picking on whoever the people who control it, Clinton, the U.S., want to have removed. So you won't hear them, speak up too loudly about Israel's involvement in Gaza. But when it comes to involving itself in people's internal affairs, in countries' internal affairs, you know, um, they push hard and make up facts. For example, in Syria, there was a 18-year-old woman who, by the name of Zainab al-Husni, who was told to the whole world by Amnesty International that the Syrian government kidnapped her and chopped her up into little pieces and burnt her alive. When a few weeks later she turned up alive and well on Syrian television saying, well, actually, I'm right here. So it just shows you that these organizations have an agenda and they're controlled and they're not actually pro-democracy movements. They're not actually pro-humanitarian movements. They are just there to give credence to the wars that the businessmen and the politicians want. Um,
That's
I
who
guess,
finances them, I guess. I mean, at the end of this, we probably end up focusing on capitalism, but that maybe we do that another time. But that's where it all leads to. Whoever prints the money dictates the story.
yeah.
Um,
Um,
where should we go from here?
well, I was talking about Soros, and I also wanted to mention a man by the name of Bernard Levy. Now, if you take George Soros to be, the man behind colored revolutions, you can take Bernard Levy to be the man behind civil wars and the division of countries. So he's a French Zionist philosopher, and he basically is the mind behind these foreign-funded civil wars, like we saw in Libya, and like we saw in the Sudan, like we saw in Bosnia, and he was involved in all of those things, all of those places. He was there, and he himself claims that he was the one who convinced Sarkozy to wage war against Libya, in his own words. He was in Benghazi when the Libyan insurgents um, controlled that spot. And basically, his whole thing is divide and conquer. So, two of the countries he was involved in, Bosnia and Sudan, have now been, cut up into pieces.
Well,
So,
I think he's called for action in Syria as well.
Oh, well, I'm not surprised. I didn't even have to look that up to know that he's just put up to his old tricks again. And if you see in Libya onto back onto like colored revolutions and using flags, the flag that they use, the Free Syrian Army, the the insurgency, the opposition movement, whatever you want to call it, the protesters, the and the gunmen. The flag that they're using is the old flag of the French mandate that was given to Syria by the French during its occupation, and you know maybe it's a stretch, but Levy being French, it just seems like France's old colonialist agenda in Syria with symbolism of the old French flag. And I think anybody who's um, following closely events around the world know that for some reason symbolism is important to the powers that be. So yeah, I think by seeing that flag there, the flag of the old French mandate, you can see who is behind what's going on.
The French seem to be actually on the ground in Syria as well. I've heard of some French people being captured.
Well, it's kind of on the lowdown, if you know what I mean.
No.
That there is no, well, everybody kind of has heard the rumors that 12 uh, French soldiers have actually been caught in Bab Amr, and that was the real reason why the French ambassador came back to Syria for some time to negotiate their release. And Syria purposely didn't release the information because that was the bullet they had against, France at the time. And it went as far as the Friends of Syria conference being a complete failure when nothing came out of it. Saudi Arabia walked out, and the French representative there took a back seat and didn't say anything against Syria. So this is all not in the mainstream media, but it's a rumor that has been, you know, it's seen as is pretty well established by now. Everybody knows about it.
Well, I've seen it reported on many websites, and I guess none of them are mainstream media. But I mean, in more than one place, I've seen it reported. There were the two journalists actually that just escaped from Bab al-Amr and ended up in Paris yesterday. I think they arrived, but they worked for Le Figaro and pro-Sarkozy institutions.
Well, it's interesting because those journalists, first of all, nobody knew that they were in the country. Certainly not the government. And the Red Cross, I mean, I read this on the BBC News, so it's mainstream news. The Red Cross claimed that they arrived there with evacuation trucks to get these journalists out, these wounded journalists, but they refused to leave. So it's quite curious from where I'm standing. But now that the situation in Bab Amr is under control of the Syrian military, I guess now they have to leave back to France. I really don't know what they were doing there. If it was journalism, I I'm suspicious that it was probably just a smear campaign or maybe something worse than that. I mean, if you recall, in Libya, these so-called independent journalists from the Western media, actually one of them tweeted that she called in her first airstrike against Libyan positions by NATO, like a NATO airstrike. So that's not very about independent journalism right there. So I think they have a track record and a history now where we can be fair to be suspicious of them, whilst at the same time, you have to make sure that they're safe. You have to make sure that um, they're hopefully not in the line of fire, though sometimes
It,
it can't be helped.
Actually, if you look at the Americans in Iraq, they only allowed embedded journalists. And there's a famous WikiLeaks, and I don't want to give WikiLeaks any credit, but there's a famous WikiLeaks release of the American helicopters actually shooting up some independent journalists that weren't embedded. So
Yes, yes.
the Americans don't mess around on. It was because of
No,
Vietnam, actually.
no.
You could say the Vietnam War turned around. The opposition was created through independent journalists in the days when we had such things. But
Yeah.
it just crossed my mind. I don't know. We're just having a chit chat today, so maybe just to end on a bit of trivia. I wonder what it's like now to travel on a Syrian passport. I mean, do you think it's difficult?
Um, well, uh, it isn't easy because, first of all, on a Syrian passport, to get anywhere, you have to get a visa, and the visa has to be allowed from both sides. So it has to be allowed by the Syrian government, and it has to be allowed by, um, you know, whichever country you're going to. So, from personal experience, it takes about 3 months to get such a visa, depending on the country that you're going to. If you're going to a European country, it'll take that much, if it's given to you at all. For a country in the Middle East, or it's become more difficult, but there's countries in Asia, like Malaysia, where it's perfectly fine. So, of course, it depends if the country is friendly or not.
Yeah.
But once you get to that country under a Syrian passport, uh, anywhere you go, even if you're trying to exchange money, you get eyebrows raised and a few pauses here and there.
Wow.
So
I think actually Syria is open to other Arab countries that they can go to Syria without a visa. Do you know about that? Is that the case?
in the past, yes.
But now
Lately, I don't think so. Don't take my word for it,
it
but
wouldn't it
I
wouldn't be
only
wise if you ask me. I mean, to let them all
no.
in at this moment. But
I I have a friend who is not of Syrian origin. They're actually of French origin who requested entry into Syria, but they were told at this time we're not really accepting any tourists because you have to prove that you have friends in Syria or that you have Syrian heritage for us to accept you because it's a dangerous time. But they were able to get through the Lebanese border. So
you mean illegally?
no, no, legally,
Oh, I see.
legally,
Um,
legally.
there's this unfortunate parallel between Syria and Libya that it's very hard to become a naturalized citizen. In fact, impossible. Libyans, you couldn't become a Libyan. You could live there forever, but never be allowed to become a Libyan national. And Syria is very similar.
It is like that. They have made some allowances for very special cases. If your children are like have one Syrian parent, then yes, they will be counted as Syrian. But Syrian citizenship isn't really given if you're an immigrant and you're spending a certain amount of time. It's not like that. It's generational, and you have to have a history there.
Capitalism, part of capitalism, it seems, is globalism and assimilation and multiculturalism and mass migration. I mean, the capitalists might be quite upset with Syria about this nationality law that they have, making it so difficult for foreigners. I mean, a big part of all the wars are creating masses of refugees. So, I mean, that's about mixing people together.
I've heard these theories a lot, and I have to say, by observing what is happening around the world, it seems to have a lot of credit. Personally, I believe that you should be allowed to live wherever you want. and coal wherever you feel your heart is home. But on the other hand, this agenda to destroy culture and make the whole world, exactly the same everywhere. You'd have to be blind not to notice it. Um, the reasons behind it can only speculate. Um, People without culture are easily controlled. That that could be one of the reasons, but it's still quite a big question.
Karl Marx said that. He said, "A people without a heritage are easy to control."
Did he really?
Yes.
I should maybe read his books. Though I like to have my own interpretation of the world, not somebody else's.
Well, Syrian girl, shall we finish there?
Yes, should be good.
Okay.
Thanks. Thanks.
No, thank you. Thank you.